All right, so today's lesson is on keying. Now, what is keying? Well, keying is using the computer and, using algorithms and color picking to knock out a specific section, right? Knocking out a green screen, blue screen, maybe a white screen. And the reason to do this is when you need to separate your foreground character from the background. Replacing the background is the most common reason to do this. Other times might be needing to put effects that go behind them. So even though you're shooting in the same location, you might need something very specific to go behind the character, and you don't want to have to hand rotoscope, them out. So this file I have has 4 different scenarios. The first one is perfect. The next two are horrifyingly terrible, and that's on purpose to kind of test things out. And then the last one is pretty standard student shot green screen that you guys are gonna, when you get back to the school after break, hand in your version, your AEP version of this. No need to render because I have all these files. All right. So, first up is I call it a perfect world because I made this in a 3D program, right? So we can study the concepts of keying without anything like spill and bounce light and things like that because the computer, the 3D program, is able to spit out a perfect image. So what happens with keying is that you want to have as uniform a color as possible because the keying looks at this as a 2D picture, right? It looks at like this as pixels, dot, 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 dot. And you tell it, okay, do this color green, right? You color pick this color green. And then an algorithm kind of chooses how close to that color green all the other pixels are. And you can see that right here, this is kind of half close, in which case it might make it half transparent, right? So if it's the exact color green, it's going to make it fully transparent. If it's halfway to the color green, it's going to make it halfway transparent. And what halfway is determined by which keying software you're using, right? So we're going to jump right to it. Select the top layer because that's the layer for him. The bottom layer is just a background replacement. All right. And it's under Effect, Keying. Now there are a lot of different keys in here, and I prefer to use Keylight because it's the more sophisticated one, and it just works really well, right? It's a third-party one, but it's bundled with all copies of After Effects. So a lot of different settings. We're going to stick with the top half first. Screen color is the color to get rid of, right? The color to make transparent. So we take the eyedropper, and in this case it's really easy because this is all uniform green. If it's not uniform green, you got to choose something kind of close that you think is the most close to the person. But I choose that, bang, right? So it finds all the pixels that look identical to that and it gets rid of them. All right. Now, if we zoom in, you can see here those pixels that were semi-green before. We can kind of, well, that's a bad example because the background is green, which is one reason in practical terms to maybe choose a green screen because that way if there's a little bit of bleed, it doesn't matter. There we go. So you can see these ones are kind of semi-transparent, right? Because they were partially green. Even on a solid character, a supposedly solid character, like our little Norman rig here, there's going to be some fuzzy edges, right? These are bitmap images that you're working with. Even if it's high definition video, it's still a series of pixels. So there's always going to be a little bit of raggedy edge on things. Now, the Keylight effect has a couple of really cool tools. So the top one here, View, there's a lot of different ways to look at what's going on here. For example, the top one says Source, right? That's what it originally was. You may have to go back to the source if you need to select one of the original colors for some reason, right? Source Alpha shows you what the alpha originally was, which in this case was one giant sheet of white. The alpha channel, remember, is how After Effects looks at transparency on any individual layer. When you did track mats, right, you were using the alpha of a word
and using that to mask out some, video of some sort to make your track mat words. So when whatever film you shoot comes in, it's going to be like a sheet of white paper because the entire thing is opaque. Um, what you're theoretically trying to do is change that so that instead of being opaque everywhere, anywhere that it's green, it turns transparent. And if you want to see that new transparency, instead of source, you go to combined mat. This is what keying is. This is your end goal, right? Now you can see these lines are pretty clean because the character we're dealing with is really, really simple and smoothed out. And you can see right here, even on a character as smooth and as mechanical as this, you're going to have some fuzzy spots. Now, if you have a character with lots of hair or semi-transparent fabrics, then there's going to be even more of that, right? But the goal here is to get as clean a key as possible without anything residual, meaning without any green showing up or the edges being too harsh, anything like that. We're going to get into these tools to fix things in a second, but they're not really useful here because this is, like I said, perfect. One of the things that can go wrong, and one of the reasons, like, for example, that you don't want to wear anything shiny when you're shooting a green screen is because it can reflect the color that was the original background, right? If you wear neon green while standing in front of this green screen, I'm sure you've all seen weatherman bloopers where you can see right through the middle of their shirt because they have a color that's the same as the screen behind them. Reflective materials can do this. Wearing like a white t-shirt will actually be very hard because it will reflect the green that's bouncing around the room. Same with shiny black things too, like black jackets are usually pretty tough to work with. This, we don't have that, right? Because it's perfect. If we go to worst case scenario, however, lots of problems. So this is from a BBC show way back in the day, and this is probably a behind-the-scenes shot. This is probably not what they actually shot, but even with proper film and proper lighting, this was going to be very, very difficult. You can see this is the background that they eventually would wanted because her hair is everywhere, and it's semi-transparent, and because it's semi-transparent, there's like blue spilling all over the place. Um, her makeup is a very shiny blue color. Her eyes are blue. So, I mean, they went with blue because I think there's a lot of green in the dress that you might not notice. If you are ever working on a big project and you want to know which type of screen to use, green or blue, one thing you can do, or if you only have the green screen choice and you want to make sure it's working, down here at the bottom of the composition, there's a show channel button. It's red, green, and blue. And if you click on it, you can say just show blue. And it turns the image black and white. What this is this is the luminous information for that particular color, in this case blue. And you can see that obviously the blue screen, it's very, very light. And you can see that her dress is actually very, very dark. That's because there's not a lot of blue in her dress. You might think it because it's kind of greenish, but there's not too much. You can see her makeup's running a little bit blue. So like if I was to, looking at this as a test, I might say, make her shininess a little less blue. Her hair is very yellow. So some of the darker areas are fine, but it's very transparent. That's really what we're seeing. But if we go to the green channel, she's very green. See how all of this looks really light? Because in light, yellow is not a primary color, green is. So if something is yellow, it has green in it. And in this case, it has more green than blue. So there's green everywhere, right? Her dress, her sequins are super bright light, and the hair is very, very yellow. If I go to the red, it's a similar case, right? So the fact that the blue looks like a demon, that's how we know we're on the right track because it doesn't look right. So we know there's not a lot of blue in there except for the blue screen.
All right, so that's a good way to kind of test, what does your footage look like? What is it made up of? Because it can be hard. We learn primary colors are red, yellow, blue, and that's only true with pigment. With light, it's green. So it can be a little less intuitive to figure out what you're looking at. All right, but we're going to apply the key light effect, which, by the way, the previous effect you pulled up always comes up here. And we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to show you. You can see that it's no longer that one pure shade, right? There's like light. This is kind of where her hair barely is, and then there's this darker spots. We want to avoid these darker spots because the majority of the blue is much brighter. It'll catch a little bit of the darker stuff. So we want to get the brighter stuff. So we're going to go there. And then we're going to zoom out. And you can see it, got rid of the blue. But it's obviously not the same. There we go, just checking the recording. It's obviously not the same clean key that we had here. So we need to fix some things. And there are some tools in here to fix things. So one thing to tinker with is going to the combined matte where you can kind of see where issues are, if there are issues. So for example, actually, oh yeah, there's a little bit of artifacting in here, right? Like there shouldn't be these little gray spots in the middle. And so screen gain and screen balance, we can kind of, nope, other way. I can pull that up a little bit. And no, I don't want to tinker with that one too much yet. That's going to deal more with the interior. And I can kind of get rid of the schmutz, right? And you always want to go back to your final result every so often and make sure you haven't done anything like crazy, because you can be pulling these all over the place when it's just black and white and not think anything of it, and then it turns out you're doing this, which obviously looks terrible. So I'm going to put that back to where it was. There we go. And honestly, the biggest problem we're kind of having here is that her hair is still blue, even though it's semi-transparent, even though I can take this image and you can see it moving behind her hair. What's left of her hair was still blue, because what was shot in the first place wasn't semi-transparent, oh, but it's kind of yellow. It was blue. So I'm going to unlock these two biases that they have, because if I recall correctly, it just works better when they're unlocked. And I'm going to put this back to source. And I'm going to try here the despill bias, which basically spill is when the color of the screen kind of spills out onto the character. And I'm going to select this purple. It's a little bit of trial and error here. You can tell. I'm going to see what the final result is. Not even sure that helped a little bit. The other thing you can do, actually, I've done this too, is I color select it so I can get the correct saturation and lightness. And then I bring up the color wheel and I do this. There we go. So you can see what that's doing is it's taking that area. It's only going with the edges, which mostly for her are her hair. And if I go to about, it's a little bit too dark. Ooh, there we go. I'm basically trying to tell the edges to not be so blue. And since most of her edges are the hair, if I go all the way to white, it just does the same thing. If I go all the way to yellow, it looks like crazy time. So we're trying to find a happy medium of making her hair look a little bit less yellow. I don't want to go down here too much because you can see how it makes it darker. Like you get those weird dark edges. We don't want dark edges. Start to tinker a little bit. Ooh, that one works better. There's the other thing. Sometimes the alpha ones are going to work better. Sometimes the despill bias is going to work better. So I just back up a little bit. I'm back at my source. I can select that alpha bias, go back to the final result. And then I can bring this down to, ooh, too much, too much, too much. I want to, her hair's not yellow yellow, it's like orange yellow. I selected the wrong color. Which is unfortunate. So, undo. But it's a lot of trial and error. Every image is different. So no one image is going to be like, oh yeah, that worked. Or I'm sorry, no one method is going to be the method you use for everything all the time. I'm going to select the color I want her hair to be and see if that helps. Alright, that helped. It's still blue on the edges. I don't know that there's really anything we can do to actually fix that. Oh, that's a little better. I said lock biases together. I had to take it apart so that one's gray and the other's orange, and then I put it back together, and that actually looks relatively better. One thing you always want to do too is kind of if I'm moving this around, I can see how transparent her hair is, because eventually, there's yellow in the background. You can't always see what it is you're looking at. So I kind of want to move the background behind her a little bit just to see. Now remember, these are stills that we're using tests with. You don't usually work with a still, obviously. And then the other thing you want to do is I'm going to click this FX next to key light and see what I'm seeing. And one of the things I'm seeing that I didn't notice I did when I changed the alpha and despill bias is I punched a hole in the middle of her head. Because remember, her eyes are kind of blue, and there was blue in her sequins. So, how do we fix this? Well, there's a couple different tools. Let's see, yeah, that one's not going to work. Bring that back up to where it was. Nope, in this case, that's not going to work either because the edges are too close to gray. There is another one on Screen Mat called Clip White. And that helps a little bit. You never want to do this one too much. What this does is it says anything that is close to white, make it actually white, right? So, and then also there's this pre-screen blur, which kind of it blurs all the pixels before it screens out the color, then it screens out the color, and then unblurs the pixels. So your final result is not actually blurry. It can just change the result of the key a little bit, so that it's, if I bring it back to 0, you can see how everything's very sharp. Well, it's kind of hard to tell probably on YouTube, but everything's very sharp right now and very pixel looking. If I turn up that pre-screen blur, if her hair's moving in the wind anyways, there might be a bit of a blur on it. So it makes things a little less blocky. And it also helped with the cutting out the inside of her head a little bit. Let's see, combined matte. Yeah, it's not perfect, so there's still some tweaking I should do here. Turning, see, I can't turn that down. Gets rid of the black too much. Unless I turn this down and also turn this down. No, I'm not happy with that. So, you're never going to get this one perfect. Just going to tell you that right now. And there is a trick to help with interior losses that I'm going to show you on the next one. Because the next one makes a little bit more sense. So, this guy, he's scaled a little bit wrong. I'm not sure why. So, we're going to unchain these a little bit. There we go. You might be thinking, but why would these images be 200 by 100? Well, because they were shot anamorphic, which basically is, technically speaking, it's a type of lens that gives you more pixels one way, but the images come in to the computer a little bit funny. So this is how this is supposed to look. It's just, there's aspect ratio adjustments I had to make. So obviously this is nuts. This is not even that bright. And the whole thing is brown, right? This is a very brown green and this is a very brown brown. So, and then you've got, I think this is a second pilot back here, and you've got reflections of stuff in here, and it can be hard to tell like which stuff needs to stay and which stuff needs to go. And then this is the image that's behind them. Now this image is unhelpful in terms of figuring out if my key is working because it's the same color as what's behind him. And you're going to see in a minute when I put a key light on this. If I go to key light, we know from experience in class that this little hot spot right here is a very good place to pull a key from because it's a very bright. Nope. Wow. If you get the right pixel, anyways, apparently. There it is. If you get one of the brighter pixels, that's what we're looking for. This is a little bit hard to tell what's going on because the footage behind them is grainy. So you can't, what's artifacts and what's grainy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do layer, new, solid. And I'm going to choose some redonkulous bright color that is not in here, right? Like purple in this case. And now I can see what's left over, right? Because there's a grain on the image, the background image, but there's also clearly something going on here. And I can now see there's a hole in his head. All right. So how to deal with this? Well, we're going to deal with the hole in the head first. If you have a situation where the inside of a character is fading away, like somehow, even though your edges are maybe coming out okay, because there's a lot of noise in here, but if I ignore that for just a second, it's clearly finding the edge. I have to get rid of the noise. I'll do that later. But it's, I don't want to have these two ideas competing, right? Like getting rid of the noise, keeping the good edge, and keeping the inside of his head, which was reflecting the green screen in the first place. No. So what I can do is I can make a copy of this dude, right? And I'm going to get rid of the key light on the bottom copy. So key is gone. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pen tool to create a mask. It's going to be a garbage mask, right? This does not have to be nice and pretty. It just needs to be on the inside of the character, right? There we go. So what it looks like is this. And what it does is it fills in, check the recording again. Yes, it's still going. It fills in the holes in the middle. So now I don't have to worry about this little spot of green screen getting lost, right? It's going to stay there. And then now my key only has to worry about the edges of the character. That's what the key is really for, right? Like I can, even if this is video and he's kind of ducking and moving all over the place, I can easily do a garbage mat even if it's animated, right? That's not, I mean, it's work, but it's not that much work. But trying to roto around like all these little details, that's where things get hard. And that's where the key helps you out a little bit, right? So I use that garbage mat on a second layer to keep the interior of this. If I wanted to color correct it later to get rid of the green, like the green highlightiness of it, I could. In the meantime, we need to deal with all this garbage. So let us try. Now, this is making, you can see that these are getting worse. It doesn't matter because I have my other layer, right? We only care about getting rid of some of this stuff. No, yeah, you can see. Well, that's a very clean edge, except that's a problem. So we can't go down that far. So I'm just paying attention to the edges of this. Let's see what else. I can try blurring it just a skosh. Yeah, that helped a tiny bit. Screen mat. I'll be honest, this one is probably harder than the other ones. Now, I said before that clip white will take anything that's close to white and make it actually white. Clip black is the opposite. It'll take whatever's actually black or close to black on the mat and make it actually black. And we want to go back to here just to make sure things are kind of working. And then you do also want to check it with this. I know we can't necessarily see the fuzz when it's on this because it's a grainy image anyways, but when they're moving, when everything is video, you will see it. Um, all right, so you kind of want to keep going back and forth, testing things, checking that you're not doing anything weird with your edges as you're moving these things back and forth. I'll be honest, this is um, if I ever if I ever got a shot like this as a client, or like working for a client, I would make them pay me more, and it would require some actual cleanup. There's not necessarily a good way to get this keyed. The other option is, I've done this before, if you're kind of like really desperate. Under Effect, Color Correction, there are, let's see, Color Balance. What I could do is I can turn down the shadow green, but turn up the highlight green. I can try and trick it like that. He's got a little bit of green in here too. But the idea is that to make this green more green than the other stuff. Like to try and, what's midtones in here? To try and sharpen this up a little bit. The highlights, I can take away the red maybe. See, these are so close. That's a problem. Now, I know I'm messing with this image. I can fix it again afterwards, right? If I don't go too far with this color balance trick, I can try and bring out the green in this as much as I can. And then, let's see, midtone red. Nope, nope, nope. I can bring this out as much as I can, make this kind of green, and then fix it later. Like I'm trying to take the red out of this section and take the green out of this section, which is not easy. But we can try that. So I have that. I'm going to ignore this key light up here because it's got different settings. These go in order. These process in order. So if I tell it to change the colors and then apply the key, it's applying the key to these changed colors, not to the original footage. It's ignoring the original footage and it's just looking at this. I make no promises that this actually works, but we can certainly try. Let's see what that did. That's still pretty noisy. And what I did ended up actually making this interior thing a little bit worse. I might be able to kind of fix it with some of this stuff. But yeah, this footage is very far gone. If you guys get a good key out of this, I will be mighty, mighty impressed. Alright. But the one I want you to work on is this. We shot this, we were lucky enough to finally get HD cameras, and this was back in 2009, so this was a while ago. Which is why the footage is blah 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 with like a code number .mxf. These are old cameras that we shot this with. And we also realized afterwards that if you want to have someone flying, you can just tilt the camera 90 degrees and have them stand on their tippy toes. We learned that after the fact. Alright, so this is actually video. So it's a little bit harder, right? But I want you to use some of these tools to try and see what kind of key you can pull from here. I don't care about the soapbox. That was our mistake when we were shooting. You can safely ignore that. What I do want you guys to do though on this one is, remember I showed you the garbage mat on this one where it was this right here to keep the interior of someone? Well, what you can do on the actual footage that you're going to key is you can do a garbage mat around the figure so that we get rid of some of the extra stuff. Because if we were to zoom in, this is a pretty strong key. And actually, I can't see it now. I know it's here, though. There are inconsistencies in here. My monitor's too bright, so I can't see them. But there are creases in the video somewhere. And there are imperfections. And there's always going to be that. And there's also this crap over here. And I think there's a little bit of something over here, right? So, what you want to do is you kind of watch the video and you realize like where he is the majority of the time. Ignore that where he falls. Um, and again, pen tool, and do not go along the edge. You will be there forever animating it for every time he moves. Now, because this is such a well shot green screen, I can actually be pretty liberal, right? I can, look at this. I'm going all the way out here, close that off. But now, just look at how much less screen I have to deal with. All this is already gone. Like, if there's any type of artifacts or anything that's inconsistent, that's in all of these empty spaces, I don't have to worry about them anymore because they're no longer there. So this is why we do a garbage mat. Now, step 2 is to watch the video and make sure you don't lose your character anywhere, like I already am with the feet. So I have to give his feet a little bit more room. And yeah, I need to go like right to the edge of the video for this one. Here we are. Oh, there we go. All right. Now, if the green screen did not come out very well, like if you really need to get a lot closer to the character, you bring up the masks and you click the stopwatch on mask path, and you can animate these pieces kind of getting close, like moving up, moving down. And it can still be pretty general. You might not need that many keyframes depending on how the character's moving. But if your green screen is really, not that strong and hard to work with, you're trying to get rid of as much of it as possible, right? So you get rid of as much of the junk around here as possible, and then you're just worrying about the key for the edges. Because that's really what it's about, is it's getting the edges down. Because I can do a garbage mat all day, easily on stuff. Ooh, error message. We're going to pause this. Apologies for that, guys. What happened there was actually After Effects uses a lot of RAM. What you can have happen sometimes if you have it open long enough, like I've had this open for a while tinkering with stuff, and you don't close the program down, it doesn't necessarily give back resources to the rest of the computer, and it just keeps hogging more and more, and it's not even using them. And that's what happened. My message was, you have to close this down, it's using too much, and it might have crashed the video recording software, which we don't want. So that can happen sometimes. Just save, close the entire program, and go back in. That's not uncommon. Okay, so that's your garbage mat, right? You might need to get it closer depending on how good the key is, but this is a pretty good key, so we're just going to go to that footage, effect, key light. I don't have to be too picky because that green's pretty clear. And you might be thinking to yourself, that looks great. Yeah, I already know because I've worked with this before that you'd be surprised. The shorts didn't look that green, but apparently those neon colored stripes, yellow stripes in his shirt, and his shadows were picking up bounce from the green screen. Or as the case in this case, we were using LED lights. It was a ring around the camera, and his shirt was picking up hints of green. You could see green. So what we need to do is tinker with these things a little bit. Nope. Let's see. Shifting that for once actually worked. And wrong direction. Nope, nope. Screen gain is more about dealing with what's going on in the background, like if there's any fuzz that you're trying to get rid of, and then the screen balance is the balance between these two things. Let's see, I can. Oh, there we go. I didn't even have to do that much, but we should check the final result. And he's got a little bit of a dark line. It's a little bit not as transparent as I would want it to be. It's getting kind of heavy in there. Wonder if I blur that ever so slightly. That kind of helps a little bit. That's what you have to be afraid of. If I turn this way down just for a second, right? That's an exaggerated version. But the edges of the character are supposed to be a wee bit fuzzy. And if you turn the clip white down too much, you're gonna get, yeah, you'll get rid of the grays that were in here, but you're also gonna mess up your edges. Um, Let me see here. I'm gonna click on one of these greener areas here. Whoops, I have that locked together. We'll see if that actually helps anything. Probably not. Huh, that actually did work. Final result. Not terrible. And you have to, like, watch it. Because you want to see what happens as the character moves. One final thing, if I make this sky a little bit, nope, scale. I'm stretching it a little bit, I shouldn't do that. So you get a nice key on your character, and I mean, obviously we don't think he's flying through the sky, but you know, it still doesn't quite match. That's because the lighting doesn't match. Now, some things we cannot change in post. It was pretty severe shadows on his right here and here. It's a very sharp line. You would not get that if you were flying up in the sky in the middle of the day, as this suggests. So one thing you can do is make sure your background, you know, make sure if you don't have much control over your lighting, you can change your background to match this. So I could change this out from a daytime sky to more of an evening sky, and then this shadow would make much more sense. The other thing I need to do is this was shot inside, and as good as our lights are, they're still a little bit warmer than the outside. So I need to select him, and I need to go to Effect and Color Correction. And there's a few things I want to do. One is I want to desaturate him a little bit. He's very, very bright, and if you're like, there's a lot of color, and if you're outside, like, you know, with all that light, you're going to be a little bit desaturated. I can bring up the lightness. Obviously, I don't want to do too much. But we want to kind of, yeah, that's like really punchy. Yeah, we can desaturate them a little bit. And then the other thing I can do is Effect, Color Correction, Color, oh, Levels. That's another one. Actually, I probably should have done that first before I desaturated him. So we're going to throw that before that. We're going to turn off desaturation just to see what happens. And I'm going to take this middle one right here. This is the balance of light to dark. And if I pull it this way, what it's doing is it's saying all these parts that used to be lighter, they are now in the dark side. So it can kind of make it look like it was at night. And if I throw this way a little bit, that's actually accomplishing more of what I want, because more of the light things are considered light. There we go. And now I don't think I even need, I can bring the lightness thing back down to 0. Yeah, there we go, because the levels was accomplishing that. And I probably don't need to desaturate him that much. Yeah. No. Just a little bit. Right, so use things like levels, hue, saturation. You can also use the color balance. He's still a touch green. I mean, it's just, there's not much you can do other than, I hate to say fix it in post, but you know, I can turn down the green in him ever so slightly on the midtones. Yeah, see, it's warming him up already. There we go. And if we look at it there, so much more better. Because now that you see it, you're like, oh wow, he looks like he's sick. Oh wow, he looks fine. It's a subtle change, but it makes a big difference. He's also a touch too red now, because if you're outside, the light is just simply a little bit bluer, although I might have made him a little bit purple now. Yeah, I don't want that. We're going to take away the blue from the shadows and the midtones and just leave it on the highlights. Yeah, that's better. Green, not green. Sick, not sick. Such a difference. Alright, and honestly, that's going to be, when it comes to your assignments, I'm looking at that more than the actual green screen, because I know for a fact that we do not have the best setup. So when you're doing your crazy weather or your special effects, I will care more about what you're doing to match the color of the person, the lighting of them to whatever you're putting behind them. I will care about that more than necessarily the edges because there is going to be a limit to how well we can shoot our green screen. It's just a practical side effect of being in a smaller school. So just know that. So pay attention to these things like levels, hue, saturation, and what you would do to match a character to their background. Um, all right, and think about what you want to do for your crazy weather, which already people are kind of starting to branch out of that and they want to have things jump out of them at the screen and everything. But I gave people ideas like it could be puntastic or it could be melodramatic, like the people that stand out in hurricanes. You can do a regular newscast. I called it crazy weather, but if you would prefer to do like a riff on the soup or, a real newscast like CNN, options are wide and varied as long as it's you in front of a screen with crazy things happening behind you. And remember, any music, any video you're bringing in has to be public domain or Creative Commons. And we'll talk more after break.